Hey, welcome to today's video. Thanks for coming. My name is Kathy. I'm an artist and I've been drawing my way through this mushroom sketchbook for a little while now. And today we're mixing it up with mixed media, a little bit of wet, a little bit of dry, drawing and painting on this piece here. I basically approached this like the wreck your sketchbook mentality. I started doing an ink drawing and then I just decided to paint all over it, and you'll get to see the play-by-play. I'll be using the Pentel Tradio ink pen, 5 watercolor paint pans from the Kuretake Gansai Tambi paint collection, white gouache by Holbein, and Derivan liquid pencil, and I'll have everything listed in the description. Before we get into the art, I just want to share this pen with you. I stumbled onto this pen a few years ago and I've been using it ever since. It has a really hard felt-like tip that is shaped like an arrow, so you can turn it to get different line thicknesses. It's around $7 and a pack of 2 refills is about the same price. So it's not expensive and it's brought me a lot of joy and it's brought me a lot of fun. So I just wanted to share this pen with you. It's called the Pentel Tradio. So here I'm starting to draw some leaves out of my book, the National Audubon Society Field Guide to North American Trees, Eastern Region. I love these books. I love these nature reference books. They're awesome. It's like you get more information than you actually asked for, and then you have additional things to inspire you to add to your artwork, which I love. So just started working from this book, and I just picked out a few leaves. I know this is my mushroom journal, but there's no rule that says I can't have other things besides mushrooms in it along with the mushrooms. So I'm not bored with drawing the mushrooms, but I do want to mix it up a little bit. So I added some leaves, and then I picked out some oyster mushrooms from the Field Guide to Mushrooms book that I'm also using. So once I drew the mushrooms in, I realized that compositionally, I really didn't plan things out. And I did this before I went to bed the other night, and I really just wanted to play because I hadn't done any art that day. So I just went into it completely cold without thinking it out or planning a composition, just working without a net, which is something I tend to do. And this is really like what I came up with, and then this is like the challenge that I faced when I was faced with these mushrooms at the bottom of the page, and I'm thinking, how am I going to tie everything in together, and is there even like a place to put other mushrooms in here? So if I had sat on it for a while, I probably would have done some mushroomy design on the left and the right, and then on the top, maybe I would have done them upside down and then put some other elements in the center. I don't know. But that's not what I ended up doing. I just ended up going with it and extending these little mushrooms at the bottom and bringing them, making them, a larger focal point. So that's what I'm doing right now. Oh, wait a minute. That's what I'm going to do in a couple minutes. Right now I'm embellishing the leaves and adding other decorative elements all around the leaves, the branches, and the mushrooms. We've got stars and clouds and drops and all kinds of stuff. And I'm also adding details to the leaves, which is very refreshing and something I haven't been doing a lot of ink line work lately, so I really used to do it all the time, so kind of felt a little bit old school, which was fun. And while we're on the topic of doing detailed ink line work, there's really nothing like drawing in your sketchbook and using different types of materials manually. I call it analog art as opposed to digital art. Both are great and each have their own set of unique benefits and challenges, but I will say there's something about the brain and creativity connection when you're drawing with analog tools on analog sketchbook and not a tablet or a screen. There's just something different about it, and I think everybody should do it. Okay, so I just picked out my paints, and then I decided on a whim to do an underpainting on top of my line work. I just had a flash to do a painterly muddy background and then pop some white gouache over parts, and then for some of those parts pop on some transparent watercolor glazing and some pretty colors, some like nice green colors. So spoiler, that's how this all goes down from here on in. I've been using this Tradio for a couple of years now, and I can't for the life of me remember that it's not waterproof. So something to keep in mind if you ever end up with a Tradio pen, they're not waterproof. So now I'm bringing in the gouache, and I love the milky quality on top of the liquid pencil that this gouache gives, and the way the pigment is settling in unevenly but still really smoothly on these mushroom caps. It looks very fairy tale to me. My gouache was a little too thin, and I'm not getting the opacity I want for the lines in the mushroom. So I'm gonna go over that with gouache. That's a little bit more dense, but at this moment, I'm really happy while I'm painting this that I actually chose gouache as my white for this spread, and I'm wondering why I haven't used it in so long. So loving how the gouache is so compatible with the liquid pencil backdrop, and I'm moving forward with it, using it on the leaves too. The gouache I'm primarily dipping into right now is still a little bit on the thin side, so I will be building this up, but the slight transparency is going to be working for me in a minute once I decide that I'm going to draw the leaves veins in gouache as well. When I was in my first year of art college, one of my foundation courses was graphic design. I had a great teacher, and I have fond memories, but she was very rigid in her style, and I mean super rigid. My first experience with gouache was in her class. This was the class where you have to buy the color aid paper. At least we did back in the day when I was in art school, and this is before intranet and before digital art. She was my first gouache usage ever. I don't even think I'd heard of gouache before this class, but the technique in which she demanded that we apply it was very specific, and she was a very stern critic when it came to our homework. So it is now a quarter of a century later, and I have not forgotten this class assignment when we had to use gouache in a composition using her signature technique. I don't even know if this technique was like, it might have just been something that graphic designers in the early 90s used, like a very standard technique. I don't know, but I'll never be able to separate this technique from her because it was just burned into my mind. I think the assignment was a grayscale still life, but that detail doesn't really matter. She was so underwhelmed by the entire class's homework that she made us do the assignment over again 10 times. The entire class. I'm not exaggerating. It went on forever. And I remembered gouache after that, but after that experience and learning gouache under her, I actually thought that that was the only proper way to use gouache. And again, maybe it was if you were a graphic design student in the early 90s. And I'd venture to say that it definitely was if you were a graphic design student in the 90s at the Art Institute of Boston. because she would have been your teacher. I'm very happy these days to be using gouache in all different techniques and mixing it with all different media. And I think my teacher might be horrified by that, but maybe she wouldn't. I really don't know. Okay, so now this video won't be complete unless I describe the technique she taught, right? So excuse me if I'm triggered by this. Here we go. I'm going to do it. Mix water into your gouache until it's the consistency of egg yolk and just as smooth. Then when you apply it, it has to be painted as flat areas of color with no pigment shifts at all. And back in 1990, the gouache did have pigment shifts when you would brush it on this way. I don't think it does anymore. I haven't experienced it, I'll just say. And I don't know the details about the properties of gouache to actually be able to shed any more light on the topic of like the scientific formulation of gouache and why it would do that. But that's how it was. It was like trying to control something that was completely uncontrollable because you were at the mercy of the separating pigments in the gouache you had just mixed. And it was very unpredictable. You could mix it right before, like remix it right before you applied it, and you would still have that issue. So that's my cruel gouache origin story. I'm happily no longer in a dysfunctional relationship with gouache. I love gouache. and gouache loves me. The end. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed it and my gouache horror story. If you have any gouache horror stories of your own, please feel free to comment your horror story. I'd love to hear it. Please like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and turn notifications on if they're not already on so you get notified every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching again, and I hope you have an awesome day. Take care. Bye-bye.